Hey guys, welcome back. Had a new video I wanted to put out today. We just left Cuyahoga Valley National Park, and I got some pretty good footage thought I'd share here. But Cuyahoga Valley National Park is about 33,000 acres. It's located between Cleveland and Akron in Ohio, of course, along the Cuyahoga River. I saw that it was essentially established in 1974, but at that point it was called a national recreational area, and then they redesignated it as a national park in the year 2000. A couple of the things that jumps out are a few of the attractions, the Brandywine Falls. They also have towpath trails along the river, and Cuyahoga Valley Scenic Railroad runs through the park, which is pretty neat. I'll talk about that here shortly. Actually, the train's interesting because before I got to the national park, we got to the area, I was actually stuck behind a train in a small road. My navigation looks like it was trying to save me some time. I ended up on a smaller side road, and a train was stopped on the tracks, and there was nowhere I could go. Luckily I had enough charge to kind of sit there for a little while, but it was about 25 minutes, and fortunately it got moving. But fun stuff. And then the first thing we saw when we got to the national park, when we were driving over, was the train coming into the visitors center. It was pretty neat. At least old passenger cars, but they were really well maintained, and I'll have some footage at the end. We were able to take a ride on the train itself. But yeah, we ended up at the visitor center at the beginning. We try to do that. We also like to go to the National Park Visitor Center to get the Junior Ranger book. For those who don't know, children are able to pick up a booklet that has a lot of information, but it's more of a workbook, kind of a school workbook about different things to see what you saw and where you went and what they had. And they had a scavenger hunt as part of it as well. And then it's a little bit of work, but not too much. And once they get that completed, the children can go back and be interviewed by one of the park rangers, which we end up doing to get their Junior Ranger badge and get sworn in. So it's pretty fun. Kids seem to really like it, and we're going to try to do that at all the national parks that we're able to get through. But yeah, so the first thing we saw was the visitor center, and they had all kind of information as expected. But it was really clean, really nice, very well maintained. They had a lot of different things on the walls, and maps and topography maps and information, and rangers walking around answering questions. So it was a very nice visitor center. We went on our first hike from there, which I think was called the Ledges, and it had been wet the day before, and the ledges are very wooded, so they're not getting much sunlight. So it was a little, I wouldn't say muddy, but it was a little wet and damp and slippery. There was rocks that you would be climbing on. And actually, looking at the footage, if anyone's ever been down to the Hocking Hills area in southern Ohio, it reminded me of that, central southern Ohio, I should say. It reminded me of Hocking Hills a lot, some of the rock work and how the cliff's edges were. Last time I was at Hocking Hills, I feel like they were very similar. I'm sure there's some differences, but a lot of resemblance to that. But pretty. It was muddy and a little slick. I think this, if you go on the ledges, and I think you should, I think make sure you're wearing good shoes with grip, or hiking shoes, mountain boots, something like that. I wouldn't be taking these trails in flip-flops and sandals or anything like that, especially when it's wet. I think it can get pretty slick. But I think the footwear is important there. And then we ended up from there, we went over to Brandywine Falls. Brandywine Falls are the largest waterfall in Ohio. And we were driving over, we were told at the ranger station that it's hard to get parking at the Brandywine Falls because it's such an attraction. But we really lucked out because it started raining very hard on our trip over from Ledges to Brandywine. And I think a lot of people had left right before we had gotten there, and there was plenty of open parking. And the other thing is, with the rain dumping, the waterfall was raging. It was awesome. very powerful water. I've got a lot of different footage I'll feed in here because of the rain itself. But we had one lady had come down when we were there and looking over one of the lookout points, and she said she was there the day before, and she showed us a photograph on her phone. And of course, I'm sure it was going to be more with the rain, but I couldn't believe how different. It wasn't maybe a trickle the day before, but it was barely moving down the rocks. And as you can see in the footage that I got the day of the rain, it was fantastic. It was really neat. The sound, it was real nice, and I think very loud and powerful. You can see a lot of water moving through there. There's also all wood plank deck style trails built out, so this is probably not that important for shoe style. I think for what it's worth, if you weren't in hiking shoes and you wanted to wear your sandals, it might be a little slick with the rain on the wood, but it was pretty easy to maneuver with the stairs, and they had railings, of course. There's some stairs, ups and downs, of course, at their waterfall, multiple look over spots. So I think there was 3 main look over spots. You could go down to the bottom, you could look up over the top, and you could look over to the side. But they were really they were all unique. We hit them all. And at the top, I think there was a Metro Park bike path that ran through there, and a tunnel and everything that we were able to duck into when it started raining. Again, but it was great. It helped the waterfall flow even harder, and it was really neat. And one of the other major things we had planned on doing was riding our bikes on the towpath, which runs along the Cuyahoga River. And we have a bike rack on the back of our camper, our Rockwood Mini Lite, and we have a 2-inch receiver. And so that's the same as the Cybertruck. The receiver's 2 inches, so we're able to take off the bike rack from the back of the trailer when we're parked at a campground, of course, and then plug that in to the back of the truck, and then go to do these types of rides. And that's been the plan. And one of the things we wanted to do once we got to the national park. So we went over. We actually parked. I'm sure you can get on the trail. The towpath is pretty long, and you get on the trail at different areas. We went over to the visitor center to get on the towpath, and we did. So you can go south or north from that point, and we decided to do the south loop just based off of some recommendation from other bike riders. Said there's more to see, and it's a little bit more unique of a ride. There's more shade. It was a pretty hot day. It was in the 90s, but the trail itself has some pavement, but mostly it's what I would call like a finely compacted gravel. Not nothing you sink down into by any means, but more of a loose gravel on top with a hard base. All kinds of bikes. I have a mountain bike. My son has a mountain bike. My wife has what you would call like a gravel bike, hybrid with gravel tires. We've seen all kinds of things on the trail, from kids, bikes riding to, pretty done up trail bikes that were out there, but nothing too crazy. I think it's for all ages. And there's electric bikes, of course, on the trail as well. But the towpath gives great views of the river. Of course, it zigzags all around the river. There's some neat boardwalk areas that we were able to come across, and some of the wetland feeling areas. Like I said, we went south into that part. Multiple locks, canal locks for the boats to raise and lower the levels. Back in the day when they used to use the towpath and pull the boats down the river and so forth. So it's pretty cool. And I don't even know how many we ended up passing, but each one you pass, they have a little bit of a historic signage, which is great. And we stopped at a few and took a look. And one of the locks was even, you kind of corkscrewed around and up to it, but you could actually go into the lock, and it was paved, and they had some signage in the basement, in the base of it, and you could get some more history on that. But it was pretty neat. A lot of bridges we would ride over on the trail. A lot of good scenery. I tried to get as much footage as I can one-handed while I was riding the bike. Try not to wreck, of course. A lot of tunnels, bridges, a little bit of everything. I tried to get some views, but we had a couple, so we kind of mapped it out roughly. There was a stop that we could have went to that I think was about 3 miles, and we ended up choosing to ride to Indigo Lake, which it was a little less than 7 after I saw the GPS data from the visitor center. And at these different stops, the train comes through, and you can board the train and take you back to your vehicle or take you back to where you park. So we rode about 7 miles, 6.7 or something like that, to Indigo Lake to board a train. And my son's never ridden that far. And the trail, I wouldn't say it's a hard trail, but some of it's, there's a couple little ups and downs, and some of it was a little soft because of the rain. So, and it was super hot. But he did great. He made it all the way there, and we joked about missing the train because then we would have to ride all the way back, which would, be terrible to him after he did his best ever ride. But we got to the Indigo Lake Terminal train boarding area about 35 minutes early, which is fine. And they had a restroom around the corner there, and you kind of hang out on the benches. But we joked about it. So the train's supposed to take you back to where you parked, or so I thought. We actually got skipped on the way back. And unfortunately, I don't really know the reason or cause. They were running behind or something like that. But the visitor center, I suspect, is probably the busiest stop. So it wasn't just us. And then they stopped 4.5 miles north.
That's all part of the experience, honey.
So after I had joked with my son about having to ride back, we then had to ride an additional 4.5 miles back to the visitor center. We filled up our water bottles and were able to do it. But it was hot, and the northern part of the trail is definitely less shaded. But he did great. We made it, and we got about 11 miles of bike riding in that day, which is great for him. But the train itself, and I assume that doesn't happen on a regular basis. If it has happened, let me know. But it's only $5 to ride. It's a one-way ticket, and that includes if you have a bike. They'll load it up. They have a cargo trailer behind the passenger train that we were in, and they load it up. Staff load it up, and they put it on racks. And they also take canoes, kayaks and canoes. Same price, $5 a person. And you pay when you get on the train. They take credit card or cash, and you pay right when you get inside the door. The let me see. Yeah, the passenger cars. Let me see my notes here. They were pleasantly air conditioned, as hot as we were when we got on. They also had a bathroom on it, on the train car. And yeah, it was fun overall. Besides the surprise extra 4.5 miles, which is not a big deal, my son loved the train as well, and it was pretty cool. I think it runs, I think I got some footage of some of the pickups in the train schedule, but it runs back and forth. They have an engine on both sides from what I could tell, and it runs the end of the line, and then they reverse and come back the other way throughout the day. But Ohio's only national park, Cuyahoga Valley, we had a good time. That's the second one we've been since Indiana Dunes National Park, and unfortunately there's no national park campground at this one, or we would have probably stayed there. And actually we couldn't even find any state park campgrounds nearby, or we would have stayed there. So we stayed at the closest one we could find, which was a KOA in Streetsboro, Ohio. We were only probably 15-20 minutes from the national park staying there, which was great. I've never stayed at a KOA. I understand that there are other options, but that was the closest. It was the first KOA we've stayed at. It was okay. It's not really what I expected. I kind of thought it was going to be more resort-like. We had tried to get some ice, and the ice machine was broke. We tried to do some laundry, and they had some signage on the machine about the water trouble and washing whites and little stuff like that. They also made a big stink when we pulled in about not charging the Cybertruck at the campground, which we only had a 30 amp site, so we weren't planning on charging. It wasn't a big deal, being there was a supercharger about 7 miles away in Twinsburg, so not a big deal. We didn't need to charge. But the statements they made were interesting. They were saying that it was going to fry the park and overload the system, or
that's shocking.
Something like that. There's definitely some education that needs to go on. Maybe, I don't know, maybe that's just a Streetsboro site place, or maybe it's a whole KOA thing. I don't know, but it didn't make a whole lot of sense with
electrics.
And anyway, no big deal. It didn't matter to us technically, but just something to keep in mind if you're around there. And if anyone else knows if that's a KOA thing or just this location, I'm interested. We've been to a lot of campgrounds since we've been on the road, and we've never had an issue or concern with it plugging in. Of course, it's not going to damage the system, and we can make sure nothing's pulled out of the pedestal, that the power above what's provided. So the vehicles are very smart, and so forth. But we had a great time. The national park, number 2 on our list. We're actually heading next. We're going to be heading east into Pennsylvania, and we have a few stops. I think we're going to do, I know we're going to do a Harvest Host stop on the way over, and I'll share with that. And then we're going to also be heading to a state park and then to Gettysburg area, and we have plans to stop in Hershey, Pennsylvania over at the chocolate factory and do that whole thing. So I plan on getting some shots there. But thanks for watching if you're still with me, and work on the next one and get it out as soon as I can. Thanks.